The air was thick with anticipation, a palpable tension that seemed to wrap around me like a second skin. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing the gravity of what I was about to do. I stood there, clad in a black dress that clung to my curves, the fabric whispering secrets of the night to come. The elevator doors slid open, revealing the man who had haunted my dreams, my fantasies, my every waking thought. Dante King. He was even more striking in person, his presence commanding the room before he even spoke a word. Tall, with a muscular frame that seemed to radiate power, his dark eyes locked onto mine, piercing through the fragile veneer of my composure. A smirk played on his lips, a knowing curve that sent a shiver down my spine. "You're beautiful," he said, his voice low and smooth, like velvet brushing against my skin. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. But I didn't look away. I couldn't. His gaze held me captive, and in that moment, I felt both exposed and invincible. Without another word, he reached for my hand, his touch firm yet gentle, and led me into the suite. The room was lavish, a testament to luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city, silk sheets draped over the king-size bed, and dim lighting that cast an intimate glow. But none of it mattered. All I could see was him. Dante stood before me, his fitted black shirt accentuating the broad expanse of his chest, the fabric straining against the muscles beneath. His scent enveloped me, a heady mix of clean masculinity and something darker, more primal. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming, and I felt the heat of his body mere inches from mine. "You've been watching me, haven't you?" he murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through me. "I can tell." My cheeks flushed, but I didn't deny it. "I have," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. His smile widened, a predatory gleam in his eyes. "And now you want to feel what they feel," he said, his tone teasing yet laced with something deeper, something dangerous. I nodded, my breath catching in my throat as his gaze bore into mine. "Say it," he commanded, his voice soft but firm. I hesitated for only a moment, the weight of my desire pressing down on me. "I want to feel what they feel," I whispered, the words spilling from my lips like a confession. Dante's smirk faded, replaced by a look of raw hunger that sent a thrill coursing through me. "Then let's make it happen," he said, his voice a low growl that resonated in the pit of my stomach. Before I could react, his hands were on me, gripping my waist with a strength that made me gasp. He pulled me against him, his body hard and unyielding, and I felt the heat of him sear through the thin fabric of my dress. His lips found mine, and the world around us dissolved. The kiss was fierce, consuming, a collision of need and desire that left me breathless. His tongue teased mine, his hands roaming my body with a possessiveness that ignited a fire within me. I had imagined this moment countless times, but nothing could have prepared me for the reality of it. Dante's touch was electric, every brush of his fingers sending sparks through my veins. He broke the kiss, his lips trailing down my neck, nipping and sucking at the sensitive skin. I arched into him, my hands gripping his shoulders as a moan escaped my lips. "You're even more responsive than I imagined," he murmured against my skin, his voice thick with desire. He stepped back, his eyes dark with intent, and slowly peeled off his shirt, revealing the sculpted planes of his chest and abdomen. My breath hitched as I took him in, every inch of him radiating power and control. "Your turn," he said, his gaze locking onto mine as he reached for the zipper of my dress. I stood still, my heart racing, as he slid the fabric down my body, letting it pool at my feet. His eyes roamed over me, a slow, deliberate perusal that made me feel both exposed and cherished. "You're perfect," he said, his voice rough with need. He closed the distance between us, his hands skimming over my bare skin, leaving a trail of fire in their wake. His lips found mine again, and this time, the kiss was slower, more deliberate, as if he was savoring every moment. His hands cupped my breasts, his thumbs brushing over my nipples, and I gasped at the sensation, my body trembling with anticipation. He guided me to the bed, his touch never leaving me, and laid me down on the silk sheets. His body hovered over mine, his eyes burning with the intensity that made my stomach clench. "Tell me what you want," he said, his voice a low growl that sent a shiver down my spine. "I want you," I whispered, my voice trembling with need. I want all of you. A slow smile spread across his lips, and he leaned down, his breath warm against my ear. You'll have me, he murmured, his voice a promise that sent a thrill through me. But first, I'm going to make you feel things you've never felt before. And he did. His hands, his lips, his body. Every touch, every movement was calculated to drive me to the edge of pleasure. He explored me with a thoroughness that left me breathless, his fingers teasing and stroking, his mouth leaving a trail of fire across my skin. When he finally entered me, it was with a slow, deliberate thrust that made me cry out, the sensation overwhelming in its intensity. He moved with a power and control that left me helpless, each thrust driving me closer to the edge. His hands gripped my hips, his breath hot against my neck as he whispered words of encouragement, of praise, of desire. I clung to him, my nails digging into his back as waves of pleasure crashed over me, each one more intense than the last. When I finally shattered, it was with a cry that echoed through the room, my body convulsing with the force of my release. Dante followed soon after, his own climax ripping through him with a guttural groan. He collapsed beside me, his chest heaving, his body still pressed against mine. We lay there in silence, the only sound the rapid beating of our hearts. I turned to look at him, his face relaxed, a satisfied smile playing on his lips. You're incredible, he said, his voice soft but filled with genuine admiration. I smiled, a sense of contentment washing over me. In that moment, I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years, as if I had finally awakened from a long, restless sleep. But as the night wore on and the reality of what I had done began to sink in, a pang of guilt crept into my heart. I loved my husband, Daniel, but in that moment, with Dante's arms wrapped around me, I couldn't bring myself to regret what had happened. It was a secret I would carry with me, a memory that would linger in the darkest corners of my mind, a reminder of the night I gave in to my deepest desires. The world seemed to blur around me as Dante's lips claimed mine, his kiss fierce and unrelenting. There was no hesitation, no gentle exploration, just raw, unbridled passion that left me breathless. His tongue slid against mine, demanding, possessive, and I moaned into the kiss, my fingers clutching the fabric of his shirt, as if it were the only thing anchoring me to reality. He chuckled against my lips, the sound low and throaty, sending a shiver down my spine. I like the way you sound, he murmured, his voice dripping with satisfaction. Before I could respond, his hands were on me, lifting me effortlessly as if I weighed nothing. I gasped, my heart racing as he carried me toward the bed, his body pressing over mine as he laid me down. The silk sheets felt cool against my skin, a stark contrast to the heat radiating from him. His fingers traced my jaw, trailing down my neck in a slow, deliberate motion that made my breath hitch. You've been craving this, haven't you? He asked, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through me. I could only nod, my body trembling with anticipation, every nerve alight with need. Dante took his time, savoring every moment, as if he had all the time in the world. His hands moved with purpose, unzipping my dress slowly, his fingers brushing against my skin in a way that sent shivers coursing through me. You're beautiful, he murmured, his lips following the path of his hands, leaving a trail of fire in their wake. I had never felt more desired, more alive, than in that moment. His touch was electric, his kisses deliberate, as if he were memorizing every inch of me. By the time his lips reached my thighs, I was already breathless, my body aching for more. You're already shaking, he teased, his voice laced with amusement. And I haven't even started yet. I let out a shaky laugh, my hands gripping the sheets as he smirked down at me. You like teasing, don't you? I managed to whisper, my voice trembling. His smirk widened, his eyes dark with promise. Oh, sweetheart, he said, his tone dripping with mischief. You have no idea. And then he showed me exactly what he meant. Dante was nothing like Daniel. Where my husband was gentle, Dante was firm. Where Daniel hesitated, Dante took control. He didn't just touch me. He possessed me, every movement deliberate, every kiss calculated to drive me to the edge. His hands explored me with a skill that left me gasping, his lips leaving a trail of fire across my skin. He knew exactly how to make my body respond, how to draw out every ounce of pleasure I had to give. I had thought I knew what it meant to feel good. But Dante showed me I had only scratched the surface. He was relentless, his stamina unmatched, his touch igniting a fire within me that I didn't know existed. It was as if he had studied my body before even touching me, as if he already knew what I needed before I realized it myself. I lost track of time, lost track of everything except the feeling of him, the way he made me come undone with every touch, every kiss, every whispered word. When it was over, when I lay breathless and trembling in his arms, I knew this had been the best night of my life. We lay there in the dim light, his fingers tracing lazy circles on my skin as I tried to catch my breath. "You okay?" he asked, his voice softer now, almost tender. I nodded, unable to speak, my body still humming with the aftershocks of what he had done to me. He chuckled, the sound warm and satisfied. "I'll take that as a yes." But as the reality of what I had done began to creep back in, a pang of guilt twisted in my chest. My husband, my marriage, the life I had stepped away from, just for one night. I knew this could never happen again. I had gotten what I wanted, and now I had to go back to my normal life, carrying this secret with me. As I dressed, Dante watched me, that same smirk playing on his lips. "Regretting it already?" he asked, his tone light but his eyes searching. I met his gaze, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "No," I said, and it was the truth. I didn't regret it, but I knew I could never tell anyone. The ride home from the hotel felt surreal. I sat in the backseat of a cab, my body still tingling from Dante's touch, my reflection in the window showing a woman who looked the same but wasn't. I had changed. The way I walked, the way I moved, it all felt different, like my body had been awakened in a way it never had before. When I reached home, Daniel was setting the table for dinner. "You're back," he said, smiling as he walked over to kiss me. I let him, his lips soft and familiar, nothing like Dante's. I forced a smile. "Yeah, the trip went well." He studied me for a moment, his brows furrowing. "You look different," he said, his tone curious. "Different?" I asked, my heart skipping a beat. "Yeah," he chuckled. "Like relaxed." I almost laughed. If only he knew. The days that followed were strange. On the surface, nothing had changed. I went back to my routine, making breakfast, kissing Daniel goodbye, going to work, coming home. But inside, I was unraveling. Every time Daniel touched me, I had to force myself not to pull away, not because I didn't love him, but because my body knew the difference now. I used to pretend with him, used to fake pleasure just to make him feel good. But after Dante, I couldn't even pretend anymore. Because now I knew what real pleasure felt like. And that was dangerous. The guilt was a constant companion, gnawing at me some days more than others. I'd be sitting at dinner with Daniel, listening to him talk about his day, and suddenly my mind would flash back to that night, to the way Dante made me feel, to the sounds I made, the way I came undone beneath him, and I'd feel like the worst person in the world. But other days, I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, and I'd smile. Because no matter how much I told myself it was wrong, it had been worth it. Daniel noticed the change in me, but he didn't question it. If anything, he thought it was a good thing. "You seem happier lately," he said one evening as we lay in bed. "Like lighter." I forced a laugh. "Really?" "Yeah," he said, kissing my forehead. "I like seeing you this way." If only he knew that lightness he saw wasn't because of him. It was because for the first time in my life, I had experienced what I had been craving for years. And now I had to spend the rest of my life pretending it never happened. The hardest part wasn't the guilt, it was the temptation. For days, I kept thinking about texting Dante, just once, just to see if he remembered me, if he thought about that night the way I did. But I stopped myself every time. This was a one-time thing. I couldn't go down that road again. I had crossed a line I could never uncross. But Daniel would never know, because I would take this secret to my grave. And then one afternoon I almost slipped up. I was in the kitchen, scrolling through my phone while Daniel was in the shower. Out of habit, I pulled up Dante's website just to look. My fingers hovered over the message button. Just one message. Just one. I wanted to see if he still remembered me. But before I could type anything, I heard Daniel's voice. "Who are you texting?" I nearly dropped my phone. I turned, forcing a casual smile. "Oh, just checking emails." Daniel nodded, toweling his hair. You looked serious for a second. I laughed, shoving my phone away. Just work stuff. And just like that, the moment passed. But my heart was still racing. I had come this close to making a mistake. I had to be more careful. Weeks passed. The guilt didn't fade, but I learned to live with it. I told myself that what happened with Dante was just a fantasy, one that I had fulfilled, and now it was over. I told myself I still loved Daniel, and in a way, I did. But love and desire are two different things, and now I knew the difference.